Hey everyone, welcome to The Draw. On today's episode we'll be taking a walkthrough through a basic game of Magic. Let's play. First and foremost, don't be discouraged. Hearing some of the things in this video might be daunting, but believe me, it's well worth it to get acquainted with Magic. You may find it easier to play a basic game of Magic with a friend to get a more hands-on approach. With that in mind, let's forge forward. In the last video we talked about how spells are cast. You use lands to tap in for mana required to cast your spells. Now let's talk about how you even begin a game of Magic. In a normal game of Magic in which you bring your own cards to the match, known as constructed play, you bring your deck of 60 cards. In the game, your deck is referred to as a library. In your library is all the lands and spells you have collected to do battle with. Your opponent also brings their library, obviously. You shuffle up your library and your opponent does the same. You then pass your library to them, and they shuffle yours while you shuffle their own. This is to ensure proper randomness of libraries. Then determine who will be playing first and drawing. People normally do this with the high roll of dice. The winner of the dice roll makes the decision if they will play or draw. Choosing play means you take the first turn of the game, but you don't draw a card at the beginning. Being on the draw means you play second, but draw a card at the beginning of your turn. Once everyone determines a turn order, everyone draws 7 cards from their libraries and looks at their hand of cards. Players can then choose to keep their hands or mulligan. What a mulligan is the rejection of the 7 cards you just drew and shuffling them back in, drawing 1 card less each time you mulligan. You can mulligan as many times as you'd like, but doing it more than twice is normally a bad idea. Once everyone is satisfied with their hands, each player sets their life to 20 and play can begin. Let's now talk about the parts of a turn. Each turn has 5 phases you follow in order. During the beginning phase, we have 3 sub-phases called steps. There's the untap step, the upkeep step, and the draw step. Since this is the first turn of the game, there is nothing for your opponent to untap, so we pass that phase. There isn't any ability or effect that says at the beginning of your upkeep, so we also pass the upkeep step. Since your opponent is playing first, they will automatically skip their first draw step. Now we enter the first main phase. During the main phase, the active player can play a single land per turn and cast their spells. Our opponent has played a mountain and cast Raging Goblin. Now, Raging Goblin doesn't resolve immediately. It stays on the stack until a player declines to do anything. Since we've not even played a land or cast anything else, we pass priority to let the Raging Goblin resolve and enter the battlefield. Raging Goblin, as you can see in its text box, has haste. Haste allows a creature to tap and or attack immediately. Our opponent states that he is done with their main phase and wants to move into the combat. Lacking any other option, we tell them they can proceed. Now we reach the combat phase. During the combat phase, we can only activate abilities on permanents we control, and can only cast instant spells. The steps are as follows. The beginning of the combat step starts. This is the last moment we can affect creatures before they attack or block. We can't really do anything to prevent the goblin from attacking or destroy the goblin right now, so we pass to the next step. Our opponent moves to the Declare Attackers step. He taps his Raging Goblin to signify it is now attacking us. Remember from the last video that creatures deal damage equal to their power, in this case, 1. He declares that is all the attackers he wants in combat, and now we move into the Declare Blockers step. Since we have no blockers, we can't block. We then move to the combat damage step, in which we take 1 damage from the Raging Goblin, lowering our health to 19. We then enter the end of combat step. Having nothing here to do normally, we pass it. We now enter the second main phase of our opponent's turn. He's tapped out, meaning all the lands he has are tapped, so he passes to the ending phase. The ending phase consists of 2 steps, the end step and the cleanup step. During the end step, this is our last chance as inactive players to cast instants or activate abilities. Any effect that says until end of turn fades away from this point. The cleanup step is in which no players can cast spells or activate abilities. In the cleanup step, the active player checks to see if their hand size is 8 or more. If it is, they discard cards through the discard pile, known as a graveyard in game terms, until they have exactly 7. It is now our turn. We follow the same phases and steps now. We don't have anything to untap, there are no upkeep triggers, and since we went second, we draw a card. Now for the main phase. Let's play down our plains, tap it, and cast Tundra Wolves. We now have our first creature. Creatures without haste are affected by Summoning Sickness. That means they cannot tap or attack in the turn that you cast them. Think of it as being disoriented by you summoning them from the Aether. Since we can't cast anything further, we'll pass the turn back to our opponent. Our opponent now untapping his goblin and land, making them ready for use once again. He passes on the upkeep and now can draw a card. He plays down a mountain and wants to enter combat, not casting anything during his first main step. He swings in with the Raging Goblin. Now we can declare blockers. We have a choice here. We can either let the Goblin through, taking 1 damage and falling to 18, or we can block with our Tundra Wolves. Creatures that are tapped cannot block. Think of it as them being tired and unable to block for you. Now we don't want to be taking any more damage, since doing so brings us closer to losing the game, so we elect to block with the Wolves. Now that the Goblin is blocked, we can no longer worry about taking combat damage from it ourselves. Even if our Tundra Wolves left combat for some reason and before damage is calculated, the Goblin stays blocked. Take a look again at Tundra Wolves. It has First Strike. It deals damage before other creatures that lack First Strike. So, in a sense, our wolf gets to drop on the Raging Goblin, destroying it before the Goblin can do damage to our wolf. Now, since the damage marked on Raging Goblin is equal to or greater than the toughness on it, it is destroyed and sent to your opponent's graveyard. That's pretty much it for the basics of Magic the Gathering for now. Play continues until there is a winner. One more thing to remember is the golden rule of Magic. If a rule and a card's effect would conflict, the card wins. For example, your normal maximum hand size in the rulebook is 7, but the artifact Spellbook lets you have any number of cards in hand. That's it for this episode. On the next draw, we'll go over some of the more advanced concepts of Magic the Gathering, such as the stack and some basic keywords. This is MTG Fan, and we'll see you next time on The Draw.